In any event, we have a great treat today because we have a speaker who is distinguished in so many different ways. He was the chief judge, and at one time he had his own television program as he presided over Central Florida's trial of the century. So without any great ado, I will invite Judge Belvin to come forward and share with us a series of adventures that's going to put us on the edge of our seats.
Good afternoon, everyone. You know, it is indeed an honor and a privilege to be here today to have a conversation with you. But before I begin that conversation, I would like to thank Mrs. Sarah Sprinkle for asking me to be here. I would like to thank Mr. Brian Thomas, your president. I got to know Sarah through her husband, George Sprinkle, who was a colleague of mine. But before George Sprinkle was a colleague of mine, I was a young prosecutor that appeared before George Sprinkle III. And when you appeared before George Sprinkle, needless to say, you needed to be prepared, you needed to be brief and to the point. If not, he has a way of kindly telling you to do it and sit down. You know, the last several months, the conversation in this country has focused on COVID-19, race relations, and the political divide in this nation. And with all the issues that we are facing in this country and in this community today, the question is being asked, what now America? What now Central Florida? Dr. Martin Luther King once said, the ultimate tragedy is not the oppression and cruelty by bad, but over the silence done by good people. Because our lives begin to end today, we become silent about things that matter. In order to answer that question, what must we do to change the course of our community? We have to look at 3 points. We must understand and face the past, the good, the bad, the ugly. We must understand our present day situation, not only through the prism of our own eyes, but through the eyes of others. And we must work together towards the future with a blueprint of action and not words. I was blessed to be born in Orlando, Central Florida. I was born in 1949 at home in a house on Holden Street, which is now Anderson. And on the evening of my birth, it was a very interesting evening because I came a little early out of. And I was born in a time of segregation, a time where people were treated differently. But one of the things that I learned in growing up, and one of the lessons that my parents taught me was no matter what obstacles you faced, you had certain God-given abilities. And if you use those God-given abilities, there was nothing in this world that you could not do or what you could not overcome. And as I grew up and I look back on my background, I have this sense of service, and most people ask, well, why? It's because of the community that I grew up in. And I had different people besides my mom, who was a school teacher, and my father, who was one of the first two Black police officers that became a part of the Orlando Police Department, January 3rd, 1951. Two people who gave everything to their kids and taught their kids the value of community service, giving back. And I had the blessings of my pastor at the time, the Reverend T.C. Collier, who baptized me in the Baptist church at age 7. I had the benefit, and some of you may know, Father Pender, who is about 92 years young and had a big health scare a couple of months ago, but he's back home and he's doing fine. I had a Sunday school teacher by the name of Arthur Pappy Kennedy. Paul Perkins was my Sunday school superintendent. James Green, as a young attorney here in Orlando, sort of took me under his wings and mentored me about the value of serving your community. And the man who gave me a chance with all doors when I came back to Orlando in 1977 and was on the verge of moving back to Houston, Texas, where I had a job that I refused to take because I wanted to come back home. Robert Egan. Robert Egan hired me as a young assistant state attorney, and in hindsight, I wonder why did he hire me? And I'm going to tell you the reason why. When I went for that interview, I had tinted glasses, and I had an afro that big. And I had a goatee. And when I look back, I wonder what on God's green earth was I thinking about when I went to that interview. But Robert Egan saw who I was. He saw the potential. He looked at my law school transcript. He talked to me. He knew my father. He gave me a chance. Chief Wilson, James W. Wilson, who passed about a year ago, was my band director. And one of the things he instilled in me was not practice makes perfect, but perfect practice makes perfect performance. I was blessed to have a grade school teacher by the name of Dolores Williams, who at first I thought was the meanest individual in this world. Back during those days, you could get haggled in school. And I got my fair share. And she taught me in 3rd grade, 4th grade, and 5th grade. I had the privilege of the first judge that I actually worked with was Emerson R. Thompson, and I learned a great deal from him. When I was coming home in the summer, my freshman and sophomore year, I had a chance to work for 2 individuals that reinforced hard work and sacrifice, Ty and Harriet Lake. I worked for them. I worked at the Travel Lodge Motel as a bellman. Now, my dad was quite skillful because my first 2 summers, he arranged my jobs. But guess what? I worked from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. and my days off was Monday and Tuesday. You can imagine what my social life was like. When I got to decide to run for office, I had learned about a gentleman by the name of Hugh Duncan, CEO of Sun Trust, Bill Fredericks, Jerry Chacon, Pete Barr, the stewards, and one lady that had a very profound effect upon me when I decided to run for judge back in 1988 was Jeannie Austin. Some of you may know of Jeannie Austin. She rose to be the vice chair of the Republican National Committee. I was introduced to her by Bob Egan, my boss, and she pulled out her playbook and she was able to help me. Now you may ask, well, why is he telling me these things? You are the Rotary. And one of the things that you stress is community service. And a lot of the problems that we have in our nation today is because we don't have that sense of community. We don't have that sense of service. I was always taught to give back. I was always taught to respect your elders. I was taught to respect authority, even though you may disagree with authority. There was a time and place on how to deal with authority. I was blessed when I ran for judge in 1988, when everyone said it was an impossible task for a young African-American man to run in 2 counties against an incumbent judge. I won in Orange County by 5,000 votes, and I squeaked by in Osceola County with 255 vote margin there. And I was blessed to become not only a judge, but I was blessed several years after that to be elected by my fellow judges to be their chief judge. And I served a total of 18 years as the chief judge of the Ninth Judicial Circuit until my retirement in August of 2014. The Ninth Judicial Circuit now is the 3rd largest circuit in the state of Florida. When I became a judge, there were about a total of 35 judges. There are now about 67 judges, and the number may increase due to this current legislative session. And one of the challenges that we had was moving into a new courthouse and dealing with technology. One of the things that you should know is most people back in the late 80s were somewhat averse to technology. I want you to imagine for a second trying to get judges to switch over to not my court, but to our court, to work in unison, to work as one. And you had a cadre of men and women that decided that they wanted to work as one. They wanted to have one vision. They wanted to have one court where the procedures from court to court were the same. Rulings may be different, but the procedure was the same. They embraced technology. They embraced such things as centralized interpreting that saved this area hundreds of thousands of dollars, centralized court reporting and things of that nature. And when I look back and I look at all of the things that enabled me to be successful, it all came back to 2 things. My parents and the faith and the discipline that they instill in me and this community. We have challenges as we sit here day in and day out. We have a disconnect in our community between certain segments of our community and law enforcement. And one of the things that I notice is that we talk a lot at each other, but we don't talk to each other. We don't try to understand each other. We try to justify what our thoughts and ideas are. It's a strange thing that happens when people sit down and they have a real conversation. In a real conversation, you listen, you analyze, and you think before you speak. And that's one of the major problems in this country today. We don't have the statespersons that we used to have in our legislature, particularly nationally, that we used to have. And as we see, we become more and more polarizing each and every day. And until we, as a people, begin to talk to each other, listen to each other, and come out with a blueprint, we will continue to be mired in the place that we are now. Politics is very disappointing for a lot of people, and a lot of people are turned off. But the same spirit that you as Rotary and other social service organizations and service organizations exhibit. Imagine what would happen if our politicians would govern themselves by the precepts of Rotary. What a difference it would make in Washington. Some of you, and Ms. Springer told me, some of you, for whatever reason, are interested in the case of the state of Florida versus KCN. It was a case that was not my case. It was a case that was assigned to a very capable judge, Judge Stan Strickland, who shepherded that case for 2 long years. And the game plan was that when Stan moved to civil on rotation, that he would keep that case with him and take that case, since nobody seemed to want that particular case. It was the gift that kept giving. And I will never forget, I was in Tallahassee doing my job there in terms of representing the state court system like I had done since 2000. And I was leaving the Capitol about 5:25 p.m. and my cell phone rang, and I answered it. And it was Judge Reginald Whitehead. And he said, "You got a minute, Belvin?" I said, "Yes, I'm driving back to my hotel." He said, "Well, they filed a motion to have Stan Strickland recused." I said, "What?" And I've emailed it to you. I said, "Well, give me about 35 minutes to get to my hotel, get situated, and I will review the motion, and then I'll call you back." So I called Reggie after I reviewed the motion, and I said, "Well, what do you think?" He said, "No, what do you think?" I said, "Based upon the 4 corners of the motion, more than likely he's going to have to grant it, even though what's contained in it, it is not true." And Stan's biggest sin was that he complimented a blogger who was blogging in his courtroom in his blog. And I said, "Well, have you talked to Stan and see what he's going to do?" He said, "We've talked, but he has not informed me what his ruling would be." he said that he's gonna let me know in the morning. I said, oh my God, who are we gonna give this hot potato to? And Reggie was the administrative judge, and it was his job to assign those cases. He said, well, Belvin, I have someone in mind. And I said, well, let me hear your rationale before you tell me who you're about to give this case to. He said, we need someone that can control the case, someone that will keep the case moving, someone that will stop the lawyers as much as possible from the infighting, because everyone knew that Jose Baez and Jeff Ashton did not get along. And someone that has the time to devote to the case, because it's going to require an awful lot of hearing time, and someone who knows how to manage a case. I said, well, who's the unlucky person that you're going to assign that case to? And he said, you. I said, what? He said, I want you to take it. And I know you can veto it, but you know, you're the one that can have this case. You should. So that's when that saga began. And it was like a roller coaster ride. And I'm just going to give you some highlights of some things that you probably did not know about that happened in that case. Fast forward, we're in trial. And there was an afternoon where we had a recess to give the state an opportunity to take the deposition of pathologists that the defense had not fully disclosed nor disclosed their opinion. I am told that I scolded Mr. Baez pretty harshly about that late discovery. And while I was waiting for the deposition, Cheney Mason and Linda Drain Burdick, the prosecutor, came to my office and asked my judicial assistant could they see me. And they told me to follow them. Judge, can we have the rest of the afternoon off? I said, for what? Well, we think Mr. Baez is quick. You what? Well, he's pretty upset, and Mr. Mason went on to say that at this time, I don't think Mr. Baez is safe to continue with this case. Matter of fact, I believe he may be rendering incompetent assistance of counsel. And I'm going to need the rest of the afternoon and the evening to be prepared to take this case over tomorrow. So we recessed for the day. And much to my chagrin, the next morning, Mr. Baez was back alive and well and continued to work. Another interesting thing that we did not know about was that Saturday morning, and I always like to start at 9 a.m. sharp. They came in and said, Judge, we're close to having, I think, a settlement on this case, and we need some time to talk with Ms. Anthony. I said, well, I will give you 12 minutes to talk with Mrs. Anthony. Outside where the elevator was, where I would stand, there was a conference room that had a thin wall. And all I could hear was counsel talking with Mrs. Anthony, shouting going between the attorneys and Mrs. Anthony. And then I heard a streak of four-letter words coming from Mrs. Anthony. And when they came out, we tried to talk to our client about the possibility of taking a plea of no contest to aggravated manslaughter. And Judge, I guess you can imagine, she went berserk. And then Mr. Mason looked at Mr. Baez and said, plus, Your Honor, I think she's incompetent to continue proceed. I said, what? I think she's incompetent. So I said, okay, give me the factual basis for why you believe she's incompetent. So he laid out a factual basis, and I said, Mr. Baez, do you agree? And Mr. Baez reluctantly agreed. And once they made their oral motion that she was incompetent to proceed, I had to stop that proceeding that Saturday morning and give her exam. So when we ended that morning around 10 a.m., I spent the next 2 hours on the phone along with the head staff attorney and general counsel, trying to get 3 doctors to examine her so the trial could start promptly on Monday. I was able to reach a doctor that was local here, but he was out in Seattle, Washington, but he was flying back that night. He came in that morning and examined her. I was able to reach another psychiatrist who just happened to be at the jail. And he went over and examined her. And I was able to reach another psychologist who was based outside of Tallahassee, Mariana. He drove down, and of course I had to deliver to the jail all of her medical records and associated records dealing with the fact pattern. So by 3 p.m. on Sunday, I had reports from all 3 doctors indicating that they had examined her, spoke to her, and that they found that she was competent to proceed. Those are some little known facts about the case of the state of Florida versus Casey Anthony. That case was a production. From the time of jury selection until that case ended, the jury stayed at Erosion Shingle Creek Hotel. And Harris Rosen, who's community minded, gave us a rate of $99 a night. Each juror had their own room. They programmed the television sets for the channels that did not have commercials or news. Well, news. They took out the telephones, radios. They had a suite, which was a day room, where they can go in and select movies that were provided, books, play cards, and they could have access to their cell phones. The room was about half this size, so they could call home. Some were allowed to use the computers under court deputy supervision to attend classes at night, pay their bills, et cetera, et cetera. We provided Publix grocery shopping lists. One of the hottest items that the court deputies or the staff from court administration would pick up for them would be beer and other adult beverages. The interesting thing about that trial was we did not lose a single juror, not one. It was a smooth, successful operation. We had non-disclosure agreements for all the maid staff. All their garbage was taken by the court deputies, and they were shredded and burned. You'll be surprised what people can learn from garbage. And we made sure that the maid staff were the same staff that was there, except when they changed on the weekend, and the weekend people were all screened and also signed non-disclosure agreements. Today in this country, we're at a period of time where I would say a defining moment as to which direction we will go in. Whether you're a Democrat, Republican, a non-party affiliate. We're at a juncture in the history of this great nation where the things that we do in the next several years will matter as to whether or not we will continue to be the great country that we are. Whether we will continue to be united as one people. It is organizations like the Rotary and other organizations that I think we should take a page from as a nation. You all come from different backgrounds. You all have different beliefs, but you unite around a central theme. And our country today, we seem to be divided about where we are and where we want to go. And when I think back to the history of this great nation, the one common thread that we had that made us strong was our people. We were a nation of immigrants. We're a nation that believes in the rule of law. And that we treat everybody equally and fairly. The only way we will continue to progress and grow is we give back to our foundation. Family, God, and country. And until we do that, we will continue to have the discord in Washington. And it's awful strange, and I will conclude with this, that how is it that we get along locally in our communities much better than we do in the nation's capital? How is it that our local city commission and county commission are able to get along and govern and pass legislation to govern us all? And for those of us who think that we can go along and we will all be just fine, I end with this quote. In a real sense, all life is interrelated. All men and women are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality tied into a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be, and you never can be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of reality. We are a nation conceived in liberty, that patriots paid a heavy price, shed their blood, their limbs, and their lives, so that we could look at a flag and talk about the rule of law. And if people people don't realize what you realize in this room and try to give back like you give each and every day through your activities to make this place a better place, then we will continue to wander in the wilderness, divided and not united.